Welcome back to the Health Revival Show. Today we have Dr. Andy from Radiant Life Omaha. He reached out to me because he is friends with Dr. Jess Pietros. So I guess she's not a doctor, but nurse practitioner per se. But she owns the pediatrician office that I take my children to here locally. And he got wind of our episode and reached out. And I think this is going to be another amazing episode. So if you are a parent of small children or a grandparent and you're trying to help your grandchildren, this is going to be an amazing episode. So strap in. And Dr. Andy, welcome to the show. Give our listeners a little bit of information about you, how you got into this field, and why you're so passionate about children's health.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on here. I didn't know until probably 2018, 2019 why I actually have been doing this since 2014. So I've been doing it for a while, but I thought I just loved kids and helping kids, and they didn't have very many options. But I was this kid. Somebody asked me my story, and I started sharing the struggles I had as a kid, and it just like hit me like a ton of bricks as I was talking. Like, wow, this is why I do what I do. So I had sensory processing issues as a kid. It just looked like I was a crazy kid, right? Got labeled the bad kid, had to navigate the stressors of school with ADHD struggles, had to navigate social issues. And I have lots and lots of stories around that, but it was really hard. And it doesn't have to be that hard because once I turned 27 is when I actually got freedom from that. I learned about the neurology of the brain and the body, how it works initially. And so I calmed my sensory system down and I was like, is this what it's really like for people? Like, I'm not broken. I'm actually going to make not a video, but
All right, if you're dealing with water retention, you're waking up puffy, your ankles or your wrists are really swollen, or you can't get your rings off, and maybe you're even dragging throughout the day, no matter how much water you drink, there's actually a good chance that you're not actually hydrating properly.
Exactly, because water alone is not enough. You need electrolytes, you need sodium, potassium, magnesium, because those things actually pull water into your cells. Otherwise, you're basically just flushing it out and wondering why you're still tired, you're still bloated, and you're still sluggish.
But here's the thing, most electrolyte supplements out there aren't helping you in any way because a lot of them contain things like natural flavors, food dyes, and maltodextrin, which can irritate your gut. And these things can also spike your blood sugar when you're trying to heal.
That's why we both started using Buoy. It's super simple. There's trace minerals and electrolytes in liquid form. No flavors, no colors, no sugar, no sweeteners, and you squeeze it into whatever you are drinking: water, coffee, tea, smoothies, you name it.
And it's clinically backed by science too. So studies have shown that buoy helps you hydrate better, 64% better, in fact. And that's data coming from key blood and urinary markers, not just marketing fluff. And honestly, you can feel the difference. I've had many clients tell me their digestion's improved, they have less headaches, and they're better energy throughout the day.
And Buoy isn't just for people that go to the gym all the time and sweat a bunch. They actually offer a 35% lifetime discount for anyone that's struggling with chronic illnesses. Things like POTS, Hashimoto's, Crohn's disease, chronic migraines, and every autoimmune condition. They're really committed to making better hydration accessible to people who need it most.
I actually throw it in my coffee every morning because it's such an easy upgrade. You don't even taste it, but you're definitely going to notice if you miss it.
If you're tired of playing hydration roulette and want something that actually supports your body, you've got to try Buoy. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to feel better faster.
post about it today. But yeah, I just like had this revelation of how nice life can be. My brain doesn't have to be taken over by all of those thoughts all the time. And after that, this is where we really connect. But after that is when I started learning in our process. Our second step is looking at all the life stressors, healing the gut, removing the dyes, doing testing or anything like that is usually our third step in the process. But we look at all those things and walk parents through trying to help them make sense of it. Because when you're faced with that as a parent, just like my parents were, they didn't know what to do. They're both teachers, like amazing teachers. All their kids, they were so good at connecting and helping them, but I was failing, drove them nuts. So that's how I got into it, by accident, but divine calling at the same time.
Well, I think it makes your testimony more powerful, right? When you know what it's like to walk in the shoes. And also, I think for what Becca and I do is being empathetic as
Yeah.
well, right? Like, hey, I can relate to what maybe this child is going through or what it's like to sit on the toilet and not be able to go to the bathroom, right? And just be miserable or deal with crazy hormonal weight loss or weight gain, all these types of things. And so I think that's a big part of functional medicine is that God calls us, but he also has given us the testimony to talk about because then it makes us better practitioners and doctors. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, tell us a little bit, when you are thinking about a child that is struggling, like you mentioned that you were frustrating for your parents. Maybe you were having those overreactions to different sensory inputs, or you were struggling to focus or dealing with high levels of anxiety. Like, where should parents start to look? Maybe the first two or three things that they really need to kind of evaluate, and then maybe take a deeper dive from there if that's not, something that they're identifying as being an issue for that child.
Yeah. So oftentimes parents are told that this kid is just a little boy, this kid's just a little girl, and then it's usually jumped straight to like medication if they're having struggles. But if there's consistent struggles that are happening, that's when I would suggest that parents start looking at not just finding a label for their child, but why is this happening? Keep asking why. If somebody says, "Oh, your child has ADHD," we don't stop there. We say, okay, what does that mean? What's happening in their brain, in their body? Why is that important? Like, what's causing that? So, really, the number one thing I would say is ask the question why until you can't ask it anymore. So, in our office, again, we talk about the sensory system because that is neurologically how we experience everything. But when we're looking at the rest of the body and how it's functioning, you guys know this very well. Hormones chemically control a lot, right? And when your hormones are crazy because you have stress hormones that are flooding your body in an unregulated fashion, that's overwhelming. It's exhausting. It feels out of control. But also looking at the digestive system, which you know very, very well. If you don't have a properly functioning digestive system, you have hormones that aren't being created properly, but you also aren't getting rid of waste and you're not breaking down the substances, the nutrition that your body needs to feel safe, calm, and provided for. And all of that is going to make the brain feel overwhelmed. It's just at our office, we start with neurology because neurology regulates everything.
Can
Does
you
that answer
explain?
that?
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about what you mean by we start with neurology? And I think the other hard thing as a parent, at least, is like, where is the line drawn? Right? Like, are they just a kid or is this something that I feel needs to be addressed further? And it's so hard because I think there's so much information overwhelm right now for
Yeah.
parents out there. And, I like my daughter is definitely more excitatory than my son was. My
Yeah.
son had a lot of sensory stuff though. He couldn't deal with loud noises. I remember we sent him to school with headphones because he was terrified of the maintenance man. He wouldn't get out of our car if there was a lawnmower
Mm.
and it's like there were so many, and now totally fine. We went through some therapy and some like exposure therapy for him, but now he has no problem with any of those things. And he's very focused and he's great at school. My daughter has to always be like, she always has to be holding my hand in public. When she sees me, she gets extremely excited and like jumps, and it feels like she almost can't control her body type excitement. Right. And as a mom, it's like, oh, I love that. But also, like, is something wrong?
Yeah.
And so I think it's so hard to know where do I start and do I start? You
Yeah.
know?
I would say you just nailed it in how you described things. I want to say two things. Trust your gut, for one. If you feel like something's not right, it probably isn't. Even if other people are telling you it is right, man, moms especially, but dads care a lot too. Like when we feel something is wrong, it's important to investigate that. You just want to do a good job as a parent. It's when, like, the thing that crushes me is when parents feel something is off, they're told it's fine. And then later down the road, they realize things aren't fine. And that just crushes me because they were told, like almost gaslit in a way where you are wrong. Your feeling is wrong, right? And most of the time it is right, if not all the time. The other thing that I would say is consider symptoms. So if you're okay with the symptoms that your child is expressing or the actions, behaviors they're expressing, then okay, enjoy life. Teach them how to navigate life with those. But if they seem like something is off there, like you're talking about your daughter, right? So she's like really, really excited, and you're like, is that stimming? Because it kind of looks like stimming, right? Understanding what stimming is, investigating what that is. The internet's great because it has so many different things on there and you can learn so much. But find somebody, I love doing it for people, but find people like your podcast that can help you navigate what that means because you're just a person hanging out, doing your thing, and you don't know. You didn't go to school for this. You haven't studied this for years. So that would be my biggest encouragement. Sorry, we
Can you
skipped.
a little bit on
Was that on me?
the aspect?
Go ahead.
Can you expand a little bit on the neurology aspect you mentioned? Like that's where we start. What do you
Yes, absolutely. I think I have. Yes. Okay. I will cover up the name so you cannot see it. Right here is a example of what we use in our office. So this, will you do this one? This bottom picture right there with all the colors on it, that's actually measuring the sensory system and how chaotic or hypersensitive it is. So all those colors right there, those are areas of dysfunction where the brain cannot see what's going on in the body and it's getting bombarded by overwhelm, like overstimulating sensory input. The way I like to describe it is like if you want to know what it feels like as a parent, when you have to pee really, really bad, like really bad, we're going to maybe not be as nice. We're not going to pay attention very well. That is that what that sensation feels like. And so I was a kid who had a really crazy scan. I didn't get scanned as a kid, but I got scanned as an adult. And I had a really crazy scan. Took a very long time to clear it up. But that's what my brain was like all the time, just like fuzzy, distracted. It was hard to concentrate. And I thought I was just broken. God made me different. Like he made a mistake. Like I thought I was pretty great, but he still made a pretty big mistake that made my life challenging. So in our office, we use chiropractic, a specific form of chiropractic that focuses on clearing this up. And so you can see like that top scan right there, much
Mhm.
less color on it. This kid is able to process things so much better than what he was able when he first came in. He was really, really anxious and very easily overwhelmed, very focused on, like hyper focused on things that he wanted to be, but had struggles focusing on other things that he was supposed to be focused on. Last night, we actually had a new patient. It was really interesting. This little girl is amazing, so smart, so kind, just lovable, which all these kids are, right? They just can't express it. But she was like, I'm just too smart for my class. And I like when they're reading a boring book that I already know how to read, I want to talk to somebody. And so I said to her, I totally get that. But are you supposed to be talking to somebody? And she goes, no. I said, then why do you do it? She's like, it's because I'm bored. I'm like, no, what does it feel like? Because you know what you're supposed to be doing. What's it feel like? She's like, oh, it feels like I have all these thoughts and I got to tell somebody or I'm going to explode. And she just started getting really excited. She's like, and then I got to talk to the person next to me. And I can't control it. I was like, that's what we're talking about here with the neurology. We want to calm that down so you don't have to do that, so you don't get in trouble, so your mom doesn't get all of these emails from the teacher saying you're disrupting class. So that's the neurology. It runs all of our brain. It runs our digestive system. It runs all of the hormones. When our sensory system is locked in that fight or flight response, even as adults, we don't have control.
When you say that you do specific things chiropractically, can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit more? So, for example, I've been taking my 4 month old to the chiropractor and they're just doing a cranial sacral, a little bit of cranial sacral work on him, just, gently palpitating and things like that. That's been very helpful. He was dealing with some like digestive kind of gassiness issues and then a little bit of constipation, and that seems to have cleared things up. Also, I've done some stool testing and some work on him as well. But I would love to know just so that if somebody's listening, what are they looking for in a doctor or a chiropractor if they are dealing with these types of issues? Obviously, you can work virtually, it sounds like, with many parents and have a lot of resources there. But if they're wanting to see someone in person, is there something specific, a type of therapy that they're going to be looking for?
In my opinion, which I have many opinions, but in my opinion, definitely number one is measuring. Like what they measure is going to be what you're going to be able to tell if it's making progress or not. Because as you guys, as practitioners, know, you can't fix everything. And if you don't know when you're stuck, you don't know where to go. Or if you don't know why you're stuck, you don't know where to go. Because there are times where we can visually see when we're stuck, and we need to talk to parents about what they're doing at home, or we can visually see they're stuck, and we need to talk to parents about talking to another professional. And so that's really important. I would go into any doctor and say, hey, what are we measuring? How often do we measure this? And what happens if we get stuck? And how do we know we're stuck? If you ask those questions, you're going to know if you have in my opinion, a doctor who knows what they're talking about, or if they are just a common doctor. But in regards to what we're doing, make sure they do these scans when you're talking about the sensory system. You can do other sensory testing, but this scan just tells so much. I don't want to get too nerdy on you guys, but if you want me to, I can. But
What's the
those
name of
sensor,
that scan?
what'd you say?
What was the name of that scan?
So it's a Insight subluxation station scan. The actual scan itself is a surface EMG. So that tells us along the spine if the brain can see that neurology that's coming from the body into the brain or into the spinal cord and up to the brain, if it can see that really clearly or if there's dysfunctions in that. The more dysfunctions that there are, the harder it is for the brain to ever feel calm. And that's where, going back to your question earlier, if you have a kid who has symptoms like your daughter, or you have a kid who it looks like your son used to have symptoms, but they're better now, the scan doesn't lie, right? So you could have solved a lot of the symptoms that your son was struggling with. But if you do a scan, there might be more underlying issues, which means you can absolutely live like that and it can be great. But if there are underlying issues, it's just until another stressor comes along that he's going to express that again. So it's just like a underlying agitation almost that's just waiting for a stressor to just blow over.
I would imagine that this works in a spectrum, right? So for some individuals, that child might be very explosive and angry and breaking things and lashing out, while another child might, for example, as she mentioned, like just be overly excited about
Yep.
something and feel like I have to talk in the classroom. That was probably me for sure as a child. Let's be honest, it's probably still an issue today. But
We can help you
I
too.
I would love to talk a little bit about gut health. Obviously, that's something that we focus heavily on in our practice, even with children, doing stool tests. It's a great way, non invasive, to be able to see what's going on in their microbiome, what might be impacting their neurotransmitters, inflammation, things like that. So, tell us a little bit about how that plays a role in this bigger picture of stress and sensory overwhelm.
Yeah. So some people that are watching this will be familiar with the vagus nerve. It is primarily a sensory input into the brain, but it primarily comes from the digestive system. And so the brain needs to know what's going on in the body in order to regulate things well. When there's a massive amount of inflammation in the digestive system, that is a stressor that's like disrupting what the brain is even seeing with that vagus nerve, right? The vagus nerve is the direct connection, like electricity, like a light switch, right? But if there's inflammation, especially in abundance, we need to figure out what those pieces are. We again start with that neurological piece and making sure that the brain can see things clearly, but then we will often go to the digestive system as a important factor. We will usually refer that out. We might get into doing some testing ourselves just to make it really simple, but as you know, it can be complex, and I don't want to do that anymore. I used to when I first started because I know how important hormones are, how important the digestive system is. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'll talk about it now. So in 2023, we had just had a baby. Um, I almost died. I was super stressed out, and I didn't know this for months, but I had like ulcers all inside my digestive system. I was bleeding and didn't know it. And I had had a massive mold exposure. Right. So it was just a bad mix of things. And it was weird because my body just started getting less capable of handling salt, less capable of handling sugar. And Dr. Jessica, we'll call her doctor, she earned it, right? She's the one who actually helped me really figure it out. I had a bunch of great practitioners helping me figure it out, but I was just like, something is off. My body feels so crazy. And she brought up the mold issue. And then I kind of put all other pieces together. But wow, when I did the stool test for my gut, it was like I didn't have any really bad bacteria in there, but I had good bacteria that were way too high and other good bacteria that were way too low. So it was just like dysregulated. The only thing I could eat for quite some time was boiled ground beef.
Hmm.
Isn't that great?
Mast cells, I feel like
Yeah.
there, right? And then, oh my gosh, okay, so mold. So tell us about this and like this exposure. Did you know it, or was it just sneaky like it is for so many people?
So I grew up on a lake, man. I probably licked mold as a kid and it never even like affected me whatsoever. And this can get into the conspiracy side of things. I might bring that up in a second, probably will. But yeah, I was around it all the time. Obviously, I had lots of sensory processing issues as a kid, so it may have affected me, but it didn't seem to affect me all that much. But we had just bought a house, and my friend, I was like, hey, can you help me rip my kitchen apart? Because whoever had the house before us, like remodeled it and took up half the kitchen with the HVAC system. It was just it was terrible. So we ripped all of that HVAC system out, and I got a very big puff of whatever was in the HVAC system. And I wasn't wearing a mask because I never wore a mask as a kid, right? He's got a whole respirator on. I got a picture of it. It's hilarious. They spray foamed everything. It was a mess, but I got a huge, massive inhalation for for probably like half an hour, an hour of whatever was in that system. And then I ended up crawling up in the attic to remove the pieces that were up there. And there was straight up mold on the inside of that. And I was like, are you serious? Like, what the heck? But again, it wasn't till months later when I was having these weird symptoms. And I don't know if I said it earlier, but my insides were just like slowly constricting more and more and more and more. And I could not figure out what was going on. But if you could imagine a snake wrapped around you, but you can't see it, that is what it felt like. So,
A lot of abdominal pain.
oh my gosh, and it was just wild. I don't even know how to describe it so people can really understand it, but it was concerning, but I didn't like there was no overt symptom where I was like I need to go to the hospital or anything like that, which I'm actually kind of glad I didn't go to the hospital for that because I don't think they would have handled it really well. But that's where with mold, I had this theory, and I've been reading a lot about like energy medicine and all sorts of stuff. A PEMF mat is one of the things that kept me alive. Insane. Because I always thought that stuff was kind of like kooky and crazy, but it legit was the only thing that gave me the energy to get through the day. And then I would just go home and like pass out. And I just did that for probably 6 months. My wife had to raise our kids all on her own. But so after learning about the energy medicine stuff, I was like, 5G towers. I've been hearing so much more about mold and dysfunction related to that after the 5G towers came into effect years ago. And so I was like, I bet magnetic fields that are constant and excessive are where things like mold grow because mold is a natural occurring thing that basically eats dead things. God created it to be part of the cycle. But when you have those EMFs that are not stopping and they're just constant on you, that's creating like a dead energy. It's creating a dead environment. I was like, I wonder. So I've seen some articles that talk about that. So I'm getting more and more convinced that that is a concern that people need to be aware of too, because that does affect hormones, like you guys talk about. That does affect gut and how the body works. And it absolutely affects neurology, like the main thing that we focus on. So that's my conspiracy theory. That seems
So
to
you'll
be
have to
true.
listen to. You'll probably geek out if you find him. His name is Alex Kickle. He was just talking about this yesterday. I was listening to him. He's one of our mentors, but he was on Mind Pump, and he was talking about the energy and even just how our water is dead, that it goes through the piping systems, it doesn't spin the way that it used to, and just all this kind of stuff. He has some things that he wears in his shoes or like a necklace or different stuff. And again, totally on my end right now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, well, it's a little kind of woo woo.
Yep.
I'm not sure I'm bought into this, and I have a lot of clients who they're like, do I really need to buy these sheets or the
Yep.
mattresses? And I think there is validity to good quality things, right? Just like we think about the EMF blockers and things like that. Um, I don't have a brand that I would recommend. So I'm curious if you do have something that PM, the mat that you like, but I think they're I'm just a little skeptical. I want to know that it works and it's a good quality brand before I spend money on it. It's kind of like those
Totally.
H2 bottles, right? We bought some, they were like $70. And then my husband looked them up on like a Chinese website. And he's like, these are like $17 over here on this
Yeah.
website, but that company's selling them for up to $550. So it's just like, how do I know that what I'm getting is legit and valid?
I don't know. Th That's still, like, outside of my realm, and we don't necessarily use that with our patients, even though we're about ready to open that up more to our patients, the stuff that I've really vetted myself, because 'cause we're gonna have, like, a red light in our office, and the PEMF is the way I see those things specifically. Red light is super calming, super relaxing. I thought it was dumb until my mom made me do it, and I mean dumb, like, I don't have time for that. It can be good, and I believe it works, but you do that, and I won't. But I did it and I passed out for like 2 hours afterwards. I was so tired afterward. I was like, "What?" That was 10 minutes after, like, laying on under a red light, like, what the heck? So, I ended up getting one of those as well. So, I often do use the red light, often use the PEMF, but red light is very good at calming, plus lots of other things. And then the PEMF just gives your body the energy it needs. So, it's essentially like coffee without any sort of chemical dysfunction with it. You get that caffeine high and then the drop, it just puts a magnetic field around your body. And it's kind of like taking your cell phone and putting it on the charger where it's not plugged in, right? But it just sits on the charger and it charges it up. It's wild. The one that we have is Pulse PEMF. I don't necessarily recommend that for home use unless you're hardcore because it was about $30,000.
Okay.
Yep, but like I said, it kept me alive. Otherwise, I absolutely would not have done that. But I can hop on that mat for 1 minute to 20 minutes, something like that, and my body is just like ready to go. And it's not like I have to do it all the time anymore because my body's healed from all of that. But
Yeah.
at the time, I like had to. I really don't think I would be alive today without it.
And the frequency aspect of health and how I posted about this weekend about the Earth's frequency. It's not a coincidence that it is very similar to the human body frequency. And when
Yep.
your frequency drops too low, you
Yep.
deal with chronic fatigue and energy issues and digestive issues and detoxification issues and the grounding concept
Yep.
and getting more, close to the Earth's frequency, which I believe the PEMF mats do.
Exactly.
We're meant to be at a certain frequency, and our inputs environmentally have become so overwhelming, I think, to the body that it's invisible to the eye, but to the body, it's very real. And that's why I think so many people probably think they're crazy.
Absolutely.
Symptoms that they're dealing with are not real. And maybe it is in my head. And I think doctors, unfortunately, just confirm that for people. Yes, it is in your head. And then we go about our lives just feeling awful. And so back to kind of the conversation, because I do think that those inputs that we're talking about are a huge part of this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, our kids, and this is something that like it even got to me in terms of should I bring children into the world that we live in today? Like
Mm.
it is such a different world and that is so hard to be healthy in and so hard to thrive in physically and our, screens and the types of foods and the things that kids are exposed to like that their little bodies just should not be exposed to. Is just really sad. Like it's sad that kids have to grow up in the world that they're growing up in and how hard it is to give them what like a normal childhood should be. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how it can show up physically for kids when they're dealing with this sensory overload. Like what maybe parents could look for, but then also where they can start before maybe they take the step to come to you or to come to someone that can dive deeper for them.
Absolutely. Well, and I think parents taking responsibility first and learning a little bit, researching just whatever questions they have, just keep getting answers. That's the place to really start and then do what's in your control. That's what I do. I know I do. Maybe I like too much control, but I think most people do. If I can change something, why do I need to go talk to somebody? Right. So exhaust those efforts first, but what it can look like for me as a little kid before, like this is like elementary school, I talked a lot, didn't have good impulse control. I remember it was so bad that one day the teacher asked a question. I raised my hand and only one other kid. It was a math question that I didn't know how to actually do. And one other kid raised their hand. She was like, Andy, what's the answer? I was like, I don't know. My hand just like flew up. So,
My daughter.
right?
My daughter talks. My daughter talks for nothing other than just to be talking.
Absolutely. And so that is like a sensory thing. Again, being mindful of how much of the nerdiness I go into. When the brain is overwhelmed, it shrinks in function. The brain's still huge. God made every kid to care, be creative, good problem solver, man, so be very intelligent. All those things are in every single kid. Even kids with parts of their brain missing are still so powerful with that. But when stress happens, that function shrinks, and it initially shrinks down into more of an emotional control scenario, which is going to be excessive talking, excessive thinking, maybe looking agitated and internalizing things. And the way I usually describe of like to give parents an idea of what that would look like is if a dog started attacking you, what's the first thing you do? You start thinking. You might yell for help, but you're trying to like figure all the stuff out and your brain just starts reeling. You lose impulse control when that's happening. The next level, if that dog doesn't stop, some kids are stuck here, but it drops into physical control. And that's kids that need physical input all the time, as kids that are hitting, kicking, running, hiding, climbing, like constantly. And going back to kind of what I said earlier, as a parent, if you feel like something is off, you're probably right. If something is consistently happening that doesn't seem right, that's when I would definitely get it checked out or start navigating some of the possibilities of practitioners that you could work with, because things shouldn't be so hard. Kids are hard. There's no doubt about it. It's new to be a parent. I have a third kid. He's different. He's None of our other kids climbed. This kid climbs everything. So
That was Liz's first. Liz got to deal with that with the first one. I feel like usually it's the second or the third one, and then
I don't know. Ethan is probably going to be a bear
yeah, we don't
too.
know yet.
We don't know yet. He's only 4.5 months old, but he is getting like feisty in terms of like, I mean, for 4.5 months old, he is strong. This
yeah,
kid like pulls on. We have this like sloth. If you like pull it and then like the arm like goes in and out, whatever. And now he's finally like grabbing and, he's kind of aggressive. So it'll be fun to watch him, and see what he's like. But, I know we've talked a lot about like the environment and how that can impact our kiddos. What would you say are some of those top environmental stressors beyond the EMF? So we talked about that. What else do you think? I mean, mold and mycotoxins, honestly, when I talk to mamas and like, especially when we're looking at like skin issues or reoccurrent gut issues, a lot of itching or histamine, I'm like, mold. Schools are notorious for mold. Y'all think that they're cleaning those schools with good products or worrying about every, you know, water damage that happens? No, no. Schools are disgusting. Federal buildings are disgusting. Like, what would you say in addition to some of those things are some of the things that you see really impacting kids when you guys are doing this work and maybe testing?
can I go grab a poster I have on my wall real quick? Okay.
Yes. For those listening at home, watch the YouTube and the Spotify and the video recordings because he is showing us visuals. If you're just listening on Apple or whatever in your car, go back and look because he has been showing us pictures of the scans that he's been doing, and now he's bringing in another thing to show.
Cool. So this is again going back to like what parents can do on their own. This is what this list came from. We've simplified it into 4 different categories. And we had talked about by the time this episode airs, we should have our free handout that helps like systematically parents figure out screen time. So that's one of the big ones that we see. The light just hitting their eyes, the intense flashing, the fast pace of the story change. Like watch an 80s cartoon versus now cartoons. They're wild how fast paced they are now. But that is an example of like we're going to end up having 4 categories again of these ebooks that people can use and access on our website so that you can actually walk through managing these things. The initial, I'm going to move my microphone. The initial things that we have on here: screen time, fast paced lifestyle, fast paced thinking, inadequate sleep, which We usually talk about that one in regards to like, do you have a regular bedtime? Do they have routine in their life? Food sensitivities, dyes and chemicals, confrontation is relational stress. So we break that one down for people into kind of the gospel message: connection, clear expectations, and firm boundaries. In that order, they have to happen in that order. Otherwise, they don't work. Because I don't care what you have to say to me, the expectations you have of me, if I don't know that you actually care about me, you know? And then the other one is sugars. Those are the ones that we go into as far as parents being able to navigate that themselves, that can be usually accomplished with pretty simple processes. And that's what those ebooks will be about.
Oh, I'm excited for that
I am
because,
too.
and obviously we know that RFK is now going to help get all of the food dyes, banned.
Yeah.
And this is something I was actually talking about with my son goes to a small Christian Montessori school.
Mm.
And we were talking about that next year, I believe in the handbook, they're just going to say no food dyes at all allowed in
Uh-huh.
lunches, birthday party, things like that. I just don't see a need for it. And I
Yeah.
know from personal experience with my son, not only does it turn your poop blue, but it also makes you kind of crazy. Like
Yeah.
you're a little, you know, uh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
wild child after you have that. And so even for me, like a few weeks ago, the reason why this got brought up is they had a little carnival and they asked me if he could have cotton candy. I said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're putting sugar and food dye together, like the
Mhm.
two worst things that we could possibly put into a child
Gut
without any
bomb.
other.
Yeah.
So, it's fine that I can be the person that's a little crazy on this, but I said I'm the one that has to go home and deal with him being wild,
You're the parent.
and we want to do that. So I love that, and I couldn't agree more. And while parents think that some of this might be challenging, or they say like, I'm sure you heard this. I just want my child to be a kid and to live.
Yep.
Guess what? 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have all this stuff in our food, and it really does impact. So I think that those are fantastic.
When parents say that I just want my kid to be a child, I have compassion
Sure.
and empathy and I understand. But then I also, most of the time, I'll be this bold. I have to read the room a little bit, but usually I'll be like, you know what's really fun? Cocaine and heroin. They're just a lot of fun. They feel great at the moment. I've never actually done that, but I bet they do, because that's why people get addicted to them. Would you let your kids do something like that? No, because you know it's harming them. So, what we do when we're looking at these, we're not trying to tell everybody they have to change their whole life, but we're trying to identify if one of these is actually harming their child. Because then, if we can identify that it is, which is again the purpose of the ebook, if you can identify that your child is really sensitive to this thing, it is hurting their brain and their body. And now we can have understanding when they're freaking out if they got exposed to it. And as parents, we do get to go home with them. We also get to lead them and help them. We get to choose when they're exposed to it. And it just empowers parents so much. I'm sure it irritates people when I say that occasionally, but it's also a loving truth that I want them to be able to walk away with.
If you think about their small little bodies, I mean, ice cream, cotton candy, whatever it
For
is,
breakfast.
cakes, right?
Yeah.
Cereal, right? So I think about for me how I feel as a 36-year-old adult, how he is one third of my body weight and 5 years old. How is his body going to respond? And so I think people often don't think about that either. Like it is not just a little bit of sugar, right? His body responds so crazy. And I think just educating your children, right? Like I have a lot of conversations with Marcus around it. We do a lot of alternatives in our house and we talk about why we don't like these things. He's told me before, hey, grandma got me that snow cone and like my stomach really hurt and I didn't feel good. And so we talk about why we're then not going to have that. It was like 16-ounce snow cone, which is a
I think
different
snow cones
story.
are one of the
The
I think
worst.
there's research that shows they're like literally one of the worst. They're actually toxic, I think, to children,
That's
um,
wild.
at certain levels. It's insane. And yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard as a parent when your kids are around other kids that have things and, are coming. We have a huge, we're blessed. We have a block of kids that are like all in my children's age ranges and they're always outside playing in the summertime. And it's great, but it also stinks because then parents come out and are like, oh, do you guys want, the
Cool.
popsicles? Do
Icy
you want
freeze or
the
whatever.
Yeah, like our next door neighbor was do you remember those things that look like barrels? They're like juice
Mm.
boxes that look like barrels and they're basically just sugar water.
I was always jealous because other kids got to eat that and it looked so good.
And it's so hard being that mom that's like, no,
Yeah,
you haven't eaten anything of substance today.
yeah,
You're not going to have the first thing that you eat be pure sugar. Like and it's not that I deprive my children, but what we focus a lot on is like, okay, eat a balanced meal first. If you want something that like is a little bit of chocolate or like a little something sweet, that's fine. We also bake a lot in our house so that we can do gluten free and more wholesome ingredients and things like that because I don't want to just completely deprive my children and everyone can choose to raise their children differently, but it is really hard as a parent right now because your child goes to school and we unfortunately my school is not like Liz's and we have school parties where like they're asking you to bring in green dye of something that could be totally, awful for my daughter or my son and my daughter is very sensitive to sugar. My son was not as visibly sensitive, it's still been great, but
yeah.
my daughter is gets very, very hyperactive with sugar, and so I have to be the bad guy all the time of, "No, she's not having that," and everyone else around her can have it, and she's not, and then we deal with the tantrums of, a three-year-old. But what I would love to end this with is focusing on your child's strengths too, because I know you talk a lot about yes, there may be things that we see our child struggle with. And there may be things that as a parent you wish were more quote unquote normal, right, for your child to be doing. But how can we focus instead on the hope aspect of helping our kids get through this and helping them with all of the resources that may be out there? And why do you see that as being a huge importance in this process?
Okay, you might have to ask me those again
Yeah.
as we go through it, but the first thing that I would say that I see that is the most powerful is mom and dad sit down and answer the question, why do we have kids? How do we want to raise them? Do we like what kind of adult do we want to help guide and lead here? Because you can't really force your kids to do anything. Our parents know that real well, right? Because they've gone through it and we are who we are. And we don't want to like make our kids scared of things and just submit because they're scared, but we want to educate. So I want my kids to be leaders. I want them to be critical thinkers. I want them to be lovers and givers and really contributing to community. That's why we chose a Montessori school. We have a Montessori homeschool that we're part of, which is really fun because they all get to learn how to be part of that community. So that value piece is very important. I'm not here to tell any parent how to raise their kids, but I'm here to encourage parents to think about how they want to raise their kids so they're raising them purposely or purposefully. And then I can support, and I believe you guys are the same way. Like we can support them in hitting their goals. They don't have to raise them exactly like us. So maybe somebody does want their kid to have those barrel drinks sometimes. Hey, guess what? Let's minimize that because that doesn't help you hit the other goals, right? So that's the biggest takeaway I would say related to that is parents get on the same page because I see that often where parents aren't even on the same page because they haven't had that conversation and so they're fighting. That it happens in our office when there's one parent that's like, "Yes, we're starting care," and the other one's like, "Heck no, we're not starting care." I'm like, "You guys don't even know what you want." Right? And it's important to be on that same page so that your kid can grow up like that. What were your other questions?
Yeah, kind of helping parents see their children's God-given strengths, right? Because I
Yes.
think at times too, like for a perfect example, maybe you grew up as an athlete and you want your kid to be really interested in sports, but you take them to baseball practice and they sit in the outfield and pick flowers. And it's like, maybe that's not their thing, right? And so I would love for you to kind of expand on that aspect of how we can, as parents, work on finding that for our kids.
I mean, I think it starts with compassion with yourself. God made you with a purpose. God made you with all these amazing skill sets and ways of seeing the world. And back to what I said at the very beginning, once my brain calmed down, I was able to really see what I was good at. All these years, I was good at these things, but because I was so overstimulated and overwhelmed, it made me feel like I was broken. Like I can have a million ideas in 30 seconds. Give me the opportunity. I will share all of them with you. But now I can actually use those things. So the number one thing I would say is do what you can as a parent to help your child have a peaceful, joyful life, not a pleasure filled life, not a intense, crazy, exciting life, but a peaceful, joyful life. And you'll get to see those gifts, those behaviors in a less intense, out of control, chaotic way. And you will get to see what your child is really good at. Because just because we were athletes doesn't mean that kids that are in like theater aren't good at things, right? Or vice versa. If they're into art, that doesn't mean that the science kids aren't good at things, right? And the way that our brains are fashioned, the passions that we have are so, so important. As a kid, I'm going to throw this out there and hopefully nobody gets mad at me about it. But as a kid, I really didn't feel like my parents always did the best job of paying attention to what my passions were and feeding them.
If you feel tired all the time and you're drinking water, you're probably missing electrolytes because you need electrolytes to get intracellularly hydrated. We love Buoy because this is an easy way to get in sodium, potassium, magnesium, and trace minerals into your day without any of the junk fillers that most powders use.
I don't think they did a horrific job by any means. I wasn't deprived, but the things that I was like really, really passionate about, I mean, because I grew up that way, I'm like, to my kids, I'm like, what do you like? I mean, they're only 3, 2, and 1 right now. But when they like something, I'm like, what do you want to do? Like, you want to go throw stuff? Okay, let's go throw appropriate things, right? Not rocks at my car, things like that. But getting them to be able to live life through their passions and help them understand how God is going to allow them to use that gift and passion to serve the world and help them know that God loves them.
Love that. And I think one of the things that I wanted to just add in here, and I'm sure you would agree, is that when you're dealing with a child that has some of these sensory issues or diagnosis or just is, let's say, gifted in different ways,
Yep.
I think it's really important to find community. And one thing that I was recommended by a therapist to give to a family member who's dealing with some major sensory uh, issue, seeking community, whether that's like online in terms of Facebook groups. She actually recommended foster parents, reaching out to foster parents and people who have been maybe more experienced with dealing with several types of health issues because they could be a good resource. So I would love to know if there's anything that you also recommend to some of your patients. Like, are there certain communities that you say, hey, go join this Facebook group, or this is a resource, these are books for you? Because I think that oftentimes, at least what I've seen with some, again, family members that are going through this, they feel very alone, and even their own family, immediate family, doesn't get it, aren't supportive, aren't there to come alongside them. And so I've shared with them, like, I feel that you need to get out of your community and you might need to branch out. You might need to go to some different bigger cities, even to find doctors or people who will be more experienced in handling this and be able to help you, because where you're at right now is just a place where they're throwing more and more medications and not talking about some of these deeper rooted issues that you've mentioned here and that we've talked about. So I'd love just to wrap that up and know if there is anything from a resource standpoint that you would recommend for parents who are dealing with some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to give people concepts and filters to how to see things because I don't know everything that's out there. I don't know all the community options that are out there. Find a community that does not ignore the struggle, but they don't identify with it. There's a lot of push for I'm just neurodiverse. I'm I'm not neurotypical like you, things like that. And I just that is like trying to claim the quality of life struggle. And I'm not a huge fan of that. Yes, we all think differently and we should support each other in those ways of thinking. So it would be a community. I would reach out to different communities. Like you only know once you engage with them how they're going to be, but they're not telling you this is the way it is. They are going to tell you, hey, there's always answers to why a kid is overwhelmed. And these are maybe activities that they can do where they can share their gifts, but it's definitely going to be a community that's supportive, loving, compassionate, and does not identify with the struggle, but they identify with the fact that God made, and it doesn't have to be a Christian community, but that God made the body powerful and purposeful and not to have chaos. I think, what was it? I have a note here. Dane Johnson, you guys just posted about
Yeah.
God did not make your body to be sick. And I just like to think of all the automatic functions where God is moving and we aren't having control over it. That's digestion, that's our immune system, that's sleeping, that's breathing, our heart, like all that stuff is just happening, right? So we need a place that supports that. My favorite one that I'll tell people when I'm sharing like the gospel is how much effort did you actually have to put in to be made? None. Your parents probably had sex a lot of times, and it was that one time where God was like, this time, this is when I'm going to make Andy. And this is a special time because this is when he's going to be created and his journey is going to start. And I just think that's so powerful, and like the amount of grace that is in that is amazing to me. So I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but that was the best answer I can give with that.
No, I love it. I think there are a lot of, groups and communities that I've even like been a part of and left, to be honest. When I was pregnant, I was looking at some different communities about like toxicity and motherhood. And I was like, I got to get out of here. These people are like shaming each other in the same
Yes.
post that they're saying, hey, I found this product. And it's like, goodness gracious, we can't have, I can't be part of that. My nervous system can't even handle this.
Right.
So, anyways, as we wrap up here, what is one thing we always ask our guests? What's one thing that you would like to shout from the mountaintops for all the world to hear if you had to pick?
Probably so many things, but probably that man, God is good and God loves you so much, and you don't have to do anything to receive that other than be willing to believe that He could love you that much. Your entire life will change with that revelation. Mine did. I was in, without going into again like an hour long conversation, I was an anti Christian almost my whole life. Like I would come at you. Unless you're a really, really kind person, I would try to tear you down if I knew you were a Christian. Moral superiority, right? And then one day after I moved to Omaha, got kicked out of the office. I came here to start after a couple months. I knew nobody, didn't have any friends, didn't know what I was going to do. And somebody invited me to church. I was like, yeah, sure. I'll go learn something, right? I'll sit in the front row like a good student. And the pastor walks right over to me and points at me and tells me how much God loves me, wrecked me. That was the moment that my life totally changed and really allowed me to, like, I've always loved helping people, which is why I'm in the field I'm in. But that revelation made it not about me anymore and made it about everybody else having the revelation that they're worthy. There's so many kids that come in here that are like, I want to die. Like, I just want to kill myself. And they're experiencing overwhelm. And I was that way too in eighth grade. I have freedom from all of that now. And I have the realization that they don't actually want to die. So I will straight up tell them, I'm like, you don't want to die. Like, do you really? Like you want the pain and suffering that comes with like killing yourself, then you want to be gone forever? And they're like, no. I was like, you want away from the pain and the struggle that you have right now, right? Every single kid, when I come like boldly face to face with them in that loving scenario, every single kid says, yeah, I just want away from the pain. And that's where I'm like, that's what we're here for, to help you figure that out.
And thank you for doing that work
Yeah.
because gosh, I ever since becoming a mom and even before then, but like the thought of children being in pain or suffering or, God forbid, dying, it's just God, we want to help as many kids as possible, and I love the work that you're doing to help kids find joy again in a world that feels like it's so painful for them. And parents, hopefully you have heard and listened, regardless of whatever your beliefs on anything is. If you have a child that is struggling, listen, look, be willing to
Reach
help
out.
them, reach out. If you feel like you cannot help them at this point, reach out, get them help. There are people out there, obviously, that are doing amazing work and helping kids that can feel like it's a little hopeless sometimes. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for this podcast. It's very powerful. And uh, yeah,
Let our listeners know
yeah,
how they can connect with you, find you, get a hold of those guides that you were sharing earlier, and what you guys do virtually. Because I know not everybody is going to be in your area, but if you can help them virtually, that would be amazing too.
Absolutely. So virtually, we will help people navigate those life stressors. Those we call them rocket fuels in our office because they're just like stress bombs that cause kids to get overwhelmed. So virtually, we help parents navigate the process of figuring them out. That's what we do, and it's pretty powerful because there are so many options out there. What do you do? How do you do it? I don't know. I get asked that every single week. Reach out to us, Radiant Life Omaha. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Those are our most active. We're on YouTube and TikTok as well, but we're not super active on that right now. But I don't even care if people have a question about faith. I don't care if people have a question about how do I navigate talking to my spouse, um, or I just don't know what to do. Like, it doesn't have to be exactly related to what we do. I'm not going to charge you to have a conversation about that stuff. We're really just here to serve people. And if we can help you out, we absolutely will. On our website, we will have those ebooks as they come out. Again, there's a 4-part series that's going to be coming out, but we're going to start with screen time. So if you know anybody who's trying to figure out how to manage screen time, send them to our website, radiantlifeomaha.com, and that will be up so that it doesn't have to be confusing. It doesn't have to be hard. Life can be good.
Thank you so much. And we will be happy to share this episode. If you guys liked this episode, you know somebody struggling with anything that we talked about today, or just a parent, a grandparent, anybody navigating this, who has somebody in their life, maybe it's not their own child.
Yeah.
Please share this episode out with them. That's how we grow this podcast, is through your sharing. And again, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.